Mr. Daniel Huss and Mr. Ben Shapiro, or Shapiro, if you want to be distinct. These are two amazing SDSU alumni we have with us here today. And you guys came in and actually just did a presentation for the Entrepreneurship Society. You guys both graduated from San Diego State, so if you could let us know a little bit about how your journeys started here at SDSU and why you decided to get into entrepreneurship and AI.
Ben, want to kick us off?
Sure.
Please do.
So my name's Ben. I came into SDSU in 2016 as a musical theater and film major. Quickly decided that is not what I wanted to do and became undeclared. I ended up actually getting kicked out of SDSU because I had a freshman GPA of 0.9. Literally just didn't go to classes, didn't take tests. I didn't realize I was going to get kicked out for that. I should have realized that. But I ended up getting kicked out, and really the reason was I didn't have any goals in mind. I had no motivation for going to school. I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. So I kind of needed that kick in the ass. It took me about a year and a half to kind of figure myself out and get back into the school. And I ended up getting into the Lab and Entrepreneurship program. And I had two goals in mind. One was learn how to start a business. I'd had a lot of ideas. One of my very first mentors, he was like, Ben, you've got a lot of really cool ideas, but you don't do anything with them. You don't know how to execute. And I took that and I was like, okay, I need to learn how to execute. Got in the Lab and Entrepreneurship program. Number one goal, learn how to execute. Number two goal was find a group of people who are going to inspire me to do really cool things and are going to help me be motivated because they're doing really cool stuff. And if I'm around them, I'm gonna be like, oh, like I need that competition. You know, like I need to be doing really cool things too, so I can talk with my friends about this. So I got into the program, started a company called TechMate, ran that for a couple years, ended up shutting that down. Went to go help start another company founded by a lab and entrepreneur called Endera, and that builds commercial electric school buses, electric shuttles. Still around, been with them for 3 years. Now I'm doing my own consulting agency, focusing on product design and marketing, and I've just always had a passion for AI. And Dan's actually my mentor through the Lavin program.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle. And I think it was about like a year ago maybe, I started talking to Dan specifically about like AI. I was like, hey, like I want you to do an AI class for like me and a couple of my friends. Where I asked, I wasn't like, you need to do this. I was like, hey, can
you? You were very demanding.
Yeah. So we had a couple talks about AI before that, but he went through this whole class with us over like 2 or 3 days. And I just kept going from there. I did like a machine learning course on Coursera online, started building my own database. And yeah, now I'm working, one of my clients is Dan with his AI marketplace, GravityAI, and I've got another AI client that's in the kind of sports industry. The problem that I've had a lot in my life is that there's so many things I'm interested in, it's hard for me to choose one and stick to one. Like I was a jock for like 8-9 years and I just played baseball and soccer all the time. Then I found out about musical theater and film and I went hard in on that for 6-7 years. And then I got into school and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Do something else. Also ADHD, and if you go on like TED Talks or like YouTube, you Google ADHD and entrepreneurship, there's a couple people that are out there that are like, ADHD is a superpower for entrepreneurs because you can jump between contexts so easily. You are like really creative. When you do focus and find something you love, like you go all in on that. And I've noticed that from myself. Then again, there are some disadvantages to that of like, it's hard and it's been a lot harder for me to focus on things that I don't want to do. And when you're starting a company, like there are things that you can go, oh, I have to report on my finances or security compliance, like, but if you're motivated about the end outcome that you're achieving through that work, then that's kind of how I've stayed focused on it.
I'm a firm believer that focus is overrated. And if you actually look at the way that entrepreneurs work and businesses get started, we often can think of ourselves as like cartographers, right? Where we see a shore and we pull up to that shore and we bushwhack through that shore to see if there's resources and goods, and you map out the shoreline on your map and it turns out, no, that's not where you should be. So you sail back in your ship and you hit a new shoreline, you bushwhack through there, and the ability to have many different interests and expand that knowledge, have like the dilettante mindset, is actually one of those traits that, as you mentioned, is really good for entrepreneurship. Because businesses require you to bushwhack through things constantly. And if you look at the definition of like critical thinking, it's connecting the dots between a lot of different types of disparate information, right? That's what critical thinking is. I learned something from this discipline, and I'm able to use critical thinking skills to connect it to this discipline. And having that wide breadth of knowledge and exploration early on just feels that even stronger.
Just going off that, why, like, since you guys are both business owners now, I want to ask, why entrepreneurship?
You know, you guys mentioned the word passion a lot earlier. I think that having a passion for a specific solution or problem in the space is advice that a lot of entrepreneurs get from other people in the space, other entrepreneurs, motivational speakers. Actually, I think it's very bad advice. Having a passion for one individual thing that you want to build or work on is probably not the right way towards entrepreneurial success. However, what you do have to have enjoyment of and a deep-seated value for is understanding uncertainty, living in ambiguity, and I would say having a passion for problem solving, right? For making things. Maybe not a specific thing, but making things in general and the entrepreneurship process. Solving problems is fun and cool. Making stuff is cool. And that's at the core of it what entrepreneurship is. So if you like making things, as I do, then entrepreneurship is clearly the answer. I do have less of a obtuse answer to that. I was raised on a horse ranch, and I'll happily introduce myself after this as well. But I was actually raised on a horse ranch here in San Diego, and my mom was an entrepreneur. She ran the ranch, but she also had like real estate properties. She had other businesses that she was working on while I was growing up. And my older brother and myself, oftentimes, instead of having like a set allowance, right, like a salary, my mom would say, hey, go find something on the ranch that needs doing and come back to me and negotiate a price. And my older brother and I always knew that there were certain things on the ranch that always needed doing, like cleaning the waters, scooping up horse shit, always needed doing. And, we could get $5 for going and doing that in a given day. Sometimes there were bigger projects though, like we would get hay delivered huge amounts of hay delivered on a huge truck. And I found out the hard way that the first time I did it, that it's grueling and terrible. I went to my mom, I was like, I think I was like 13 or something like that. I was like, I'll do this for, $30. And I knew I was in trouble when my mom was like, sold. So spent all day, lifting extremely heavy hay bales, getting stabbed by the hay, inhaling dust. I have dust boogers coming out of my nose for like 2 weeks after this. Your body's wrecked. So the next time that hay came in, I was like, I won't do this for less than $75. My mom was like, we'll call it 50. So that kind of go find a problem and figure out what I can charge for it mentality was kind of instilled in me fairly young. Then, last thing that I'll say about this is, I've got a bit of a problem with authority. Like, I want to run things the way that I want to run them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, I think that I have all the answers. In fact, it's actually the opposite. My general position as a leader is that I don't know, and I want to make the people around me as good as possible at their jobs because they know better than I do. But after a while in industry, you encounter enough people who think they know too well, who don't have that same mentality, and you just don't want to deal with that shit anymore.
Dan, going off that, I want to ask, I feel this thought process is a more popular thought process that's like up and coming. And I feel a lot of young entrepreneurs have that same thought process and that same hate towards conformity and authority. What do you think of the new generation of entrepreneurs who come from this thought process but don't fully understand it, and they get hit with this reality check once they enter the actual business world?
I think we've over glamorized entrepreneurship. and you see the Elon Musks of the world, right, up until recently, and the other like high-profile entrepreneurs, and it has gone from something where, you know, very few people would say that they were an entrepreneur. You would like you call yourself like a business owner, right? Like the term entrepreneur got, you know, from Silicon Valley put into the zeitgeist, and it was glamorized. The reality of being an entrepreneur, as you mentioned, you get hit with that reality very hard. It's not at all like what you would imagine it to be. It's and I don't even mean that it's an enormous amount of work, which it is, but it comes with an entirely different set of stresses and problems.
It's not as sexy.
It's not a sexy thing. You get a level of esteem with it when you've accomplished a certain level of success in entrepreneurship. But I think that every entrepreneur on the planet should know that very, very likely the first things that they try to do aren't going to work out. 80% of businesses fail after 5 years. Most startups are going to fail. It's up to you what you do with that afterwards, right? I know plenty of founders who've had their businesses after they've spent 10 years trying to get it off the ground. It just collapsed under them. But then they go and start something that, you know, for 3 years gets acquired for $50 million. So there are those stories. But for every single one of those that you hear, there's dozens and dozens of startups that have failed. And what has gone into that and led up to those failures, like, it's a painful process, man. Being an entrepreneur is typically very lonely. It's stressful. If you're one of the founders in the company, oftentimes you're very isolated. And these are the kind of realities of starting a business.
Why do you say that? Why as a founder are you isolated?
It's kind of unrelatable.
You know, you attempt to surround yourself with other founders and folks, but to your point of unrelatable, the other folks within your organization don't have to make the same kinds of decisions that you do. And you don't, there's a certain level of protection that you want to have for your team, for your employees. You want to protect them from the shitstorm that is the real world coming down on the business. Where are we going to get our next funding from? How much runway do we have before I have to start talking about layoffs? It's a balancing act between providing good leadership and transparency to the team, but also protecting them from things that will cause them to worry needlessly, but that you have to worry about. And pretty much only you have to worry about. And in that way, it can be extremely isolating. Early founders typically are on an island for years before they build up a good advisory board and other sets of mentors that they can talk, you know, in depth about the business on and help make decisions about. Entrepreneurship is a process, and it's a process that can be learned. You do have to have what I would say an internalized set of core values that then help drive certain behaviors. For example, a core value of embracing uncertainty and ambiguity, right? Which is one of the ones that I mentioned earlier. If you are someone who struggles with uncertainty, then entrepreneurship is going to be something very, very difficult for you. That's going to be something that you're going to have to actively work to overcome. And there's methodologies and processes that you can put in place to support yourself during that. However, if that's part of your ethos that you've built into yourself, you're going to have an easier time being an entrepreneur. Yeah. I can think of a handful of other like core values that are very important towards like an entrepreneurship lifestyle, but that's probably centered to it.
We talked to Ben a little bit about how he kind of had this arc after he got kicked out of college and SDSU to be exact. And then he came back here to this room, Lab and Entrepreneurship Program, and then that's where he found his passion. Was there a turning point for you where you sort of understood that entrepreneurship was the route?
Definitely no turning point. It's been a slow burn. So I kind of knew that I wanted to like dabble in the space. And when I say like, I truly believe like, especially when you're young, that focus is overrated. It really is. And we actually gear up young adults as they're going through school and college, like we're trying to force them to focus, when in reality, this should be a period of divergence, of creating choice as opposed to a period of convergence, forcing choice. One of the most silly questions you can ever ask a child that's 5 years old is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
And we're asked that all the time.
We're asked that all the time.
You shouldn't strap them down right away.
Well, I'm obviously being hyperbolic. I mean, I wanted to be an ice cream man. That was my answer when I was 5 years old. And being an ice cream man is a noble profession, and it probably brings a lot of joy to individuals. But here's the thing, at 5 years old, I was working with very little knowledge of how the world works, right? How can you expect me to plan out my entire life without that knowledge? So obviously, it's very, people listening, feel free to ask your kids that question. It's totally fine. But the idea is that a plan only works when you have a certain degree of certainty of the outcome of that plan. When the future is deeply uncertain, like it is when you're 5 years old, no amount of planning is going to result in what you think it's going to, right? That plan is going to immediately change. And no matter how good you plan, it's never going to work out that way. The world is changing around you too fast. So coming back to my own experiences on to how I got into entrepreneurship, I had this inkling that I wanted to move into this direction, but most of it was I wanted to try and build things and make things. I wanted to experiment with things. I graduated San Diego State with my MBA in 2007, and I ended up having a string of different jobs. I worked at Huss for a little while in the marketing department. One of my early jobs was at a local agency, digital marketing agency, that built websites and apps and software called Digitaria. I was kind of in a strategy role there. I wasn't necessarily I was definitely using marketing knowledge, and my undergraduate at San Diego State was in marketing. But I was more in like a digital strategy role there. Certainly marketing was a part of that. And that gave me, certainly within the field of software and digital, the early tastes of what it meant to go build something. Sometimes it might just be a website, but you're seeing how, you're seeing concepts being created that were at some point in just somebody's head and then manifesting themselves. That's freaking cool. And that's what any artist, musician, creator enjoys, is seeing things that once were not come into become. And that was probably one of the first times that I got really exposed to that. I also learned, and I joke about this all the time, during my time at Digitaria, that I don't have any real skills. I'm not an engineer, I don't code. I'm not a designer. I actually have a very not great eye for design, visual design, colors, fonts. I'm not a data scientist today. I don't have any skills to make things. However, I did find that I was extremely good at helping other people be as good at making things as humanly possible. And that also lends itself very nicely into entrepreneurship for starting a company, because no one can build something in isolation. So I recognized that skill set in myself early, that particular ability to work with individuals and get them motivated, aligned with a vision, give them the context that they need to work and make core decisions. And I saw that this is one bucket. I really enjoy making things, and I can kind of combine these two things to press forward in entrepreneurship.
What do you guys, both of you, think your strongest entrepreneurial, I don't want to say traits because that's inherent, but skills are?
Do you have an answer?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool.
And this takes practice. remember I described entrepreneurship as a process. To remove my own biases from something that I think is the right answer, and instinctually now, after a lot of practice, say, I don't know the answer, but here's my hypothesis about how to get there. And removing your own bias, thinking that you're right all the time, is freaking hard. We're ingrained in biases, right?
And that's the downfall of a product.
That's the downfall of a product.
Because you showed us the model of feasibility, if you can go into that.
Desirability, feasibility, and viability.
That's kind of like taking yourself out of your own mind.
Yes.
And taking an objective perspective.
It is, and if your default position is, I have a hypothesis about something, but I don't necessarily know that I'm right, it prevents you from getting stuck down this entrepreneurship path or product path where you're building towards something that's going to fail. And in my background after the agencies, I ended up getting deep into like product management, which is a very good discipline for entrepreneurship. But in product management, we have a couple sayings: love the problem, not the solution, and outcomes over outputs. What both of those things mean, essentially, is you can build something and get something out to the world and have it be the completely wrong freaking thing.
The market will always tell you if you're right.
Yeah. There are great examples of different businesses that have failed in one category of desirability, feasibility, or viability because they had core hypotheses, assumptions, that were wrong in each one of those categories. Like, let's take a couple examples. So if we examine desirability, meaning, are we building something that people want and is providing value to them? A great example of a company that kind of failed in the desirability category was Segway. If you guys remember Segway, those were the things that people...
The hoverboards.
Kind of like the hoverboards.
With the handles?
Yeah. I think it was only maybe like a year or two ago that they officially shut down.
Paul Blart.
Wow.
Paul Blart, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was touted as this revolutionary thing. They got millions of dollars of investment, like an insane amount of investment, so much hype. So desirability, feasibility, viability. Feasibility, is the technology there to do this, and do you have the skill sets to do it? Well, clearly they did for Segway. They, in fact, they started from a technology aspect. They had this new technology that the inventor had created, which he was just absolutely in love with. Viability, they had tons of money. They were able to manufacture these things at scale, right? So there was a business model that surrounded it, but no one freaking wanted it. They had this vision that everyone was going to be riding a Segway up and down the street, but it looked dumb. They didn't get enough feedback. Bill Gates fell off one in its unveiling, and it suddenly was nerdy. And you know what? It just didn't solve a problem that people really had in the way that they wanted it solved. So that's a great example of a desirability failure. I'll do two super quick ones for feasibility and viability as well.
Yeah, really quickly. So for the Segway, we can now look back in retrospect and say, oh, it wasn't desirable. How can we look at Segway from before? Let's say we have no idea how Segway sales are going to be, how people are going to perceive it. It's just you have created Segway. How can you look at it from an objective perspective now, before it even hits the market, and say, okay, it's not desirable? Like,
Okay.
what would you look for?
Easy test is do like what we just did in class, like make a website, build an MVP, put it out to the public, like see what interest is. Like you can go on Kickstarter, do a crowdfunding campaign. That's a way to measure whether the public is actually interested in what you're building.
Before you build it.
Before you build it, yeah. I would hope that they talk to customers or potential customers at some point, but they might have made the mistake of only talking to like their investors or like their close friends and people that knew the company, and they didn't expand to a more public view. I haven't read through exactly what happened, but there's a real, like nowadays you can quickly test those types of things by just putting it out there and driving traffic to it and seeing whether people like it or not. And then you build from that.
They actually deliberately kept Segway a secret for a long time and really, really hyped it up as this revolutionary thing. The other thing that happened when they were talking to users was they were asking the wrong things. So they had people test ride it and ask them something like, how easy was that to ride? And people were like, that was very easy to ride, right? Well, easy to ride does not mean, would you buy this and use it every day, right? So you have to carefully, you get founder happy ears. This is a literal term. It's called founder happy ears. And you ask certain questions and you start to hear only what you want to hear. I imagine that was the case with Segway. They never even released an image of it while it was in development to people who could have probably told them, this looks stupid. I don't want that. Or I prefer walking. If I'm gonna go down the street, I want the access. They assumed people would want it because it existed.
Going off that, I just have one question. What are you guys' thoughts on MVP? An MVP is a concept in entrepreneurship that's been around forever. The minimum viable product. How minimal should the minimal viable product be? So we're trying to find that balance between the founder happy years, right, and what the public actually wants. So how do you find that balance in an MVP, and how feasible should that be?
So one super small correction. The concept of MVP feels like it's been around forever. It is actually fairly new. Coined from the Lean Startup, and it wasn't that long ago that this was introduced into the lexicon. So it actually still is a fairly new concept in the history. If you look at the way that businesses have been, being built. So MVP, minimum viable product. Let's talk about how it was intended to be used, what it's been co-opted into, and some alternatives, ways of thinking, and that will answer your question. So minimum viable product was intended to be the thing that you released to test one of your assumptions. It didn't even necessarily have to be product. It could be a concept video, it could be a sketch, it could be, sometimes we actually have names for some of the things that we do now, like a false door test, where you create a website landing page and have people sign up for your product before you've ever even created it. That was the original intent of the MVP, was to build something as cheaply and efficiently as possible to test your riskiest assumptions. It's been co-opted to truly mean a V1, what can you build to get out as a product into the market with the highest priority features without all the bells and whistles. That's we should stop calling V1s MVPs. That's just not what they're intended to be.
So are they two different things?
They are.
Opinion?
I've given up though. Call a V1 an MVP. That's what everyone uses it for now. I'm going to introduce a new term into the lexicon that we're using now in entrepreneurship. We just call it the MVE, the minimum viable experiment. What is the smallest experiment that you can run to test your risky assumptions? So if I want to know whether or not something is desirable, I can put out that concept video, I can run a false door test and get people to sign up for something before launching it. Famously, Dropbox did this before the term MVP ever existed. Dropbox created a concept video where they completely faked every part of the platform that they said they had built. It was actually created in Photoshop and After Effects and some animation tools. And they released that video, and overnight, on a landing page that they created, they had 75,000 people sign up for their beta. Didn't have a single bit of working product. That's a pretty good indication that what you're putting out to the world is desirable. And they actually got venture funding off of the back of that concept video and those signups. So they very early on were able to show traction and interest in how not only the concept but how they planned on executing it.
Yeah.
We did this with TechMate a couple different times. One, towards the end when we were building out our e-learning product, like a Udemy, LinkedIn Learning type thing, we just made a page on Bubble where basically it described our e-learning product and it said sign up here and you'll get access to our, I think it was $10 or $20 course. And we just ran some ads and saw whether people converted, and we ended up getting a couple hundred people for $20 that signed up and said, now they weren't paying, but they were showing intent to purchase. And so we validated our product initially through that. Way back in the beginning, basically, like the problem statement was that seniors lack personalized resources, and that's why they're not able to keep up with technology like young adults are. And so they're missing out on all these benefits and stuff. And our solution that we had imagined was a marketplace or platform that connected seniors with tech-savvy college students and other personalized resources for tech support and tutoring. So what we did, instead of like building out that platform, which would be kind of this version 1, I just went and posted some ads. I talked to some organizations where seniors went, and I said, hey, do you want a one-on-one tech session? And I just went and did that session, and I found out whether it solved the problem and how well it did. And like I got feedback from them on the one-on-one session and like other ideas through that. And that cost me zero money. It just cost me like 60 minutes of my time per session.
So there are risk-free ways to gauge interest, and that's, I feel like, a big hurdle for a lot of entrepreneurs, where they say, I don't want to drop $5,000 and then see if people are interested. But talking to people and doing surveys and things like that are a way to check if the desirability is there without spending money. Now, I want to ask you guys, we just had a presentation for the people that are listening to this podcast. They just came in and did a presentation, gave us a bunch of AI resources that we should access to create a business, and kind of connected AI to entrepreneurship. You guys have your own AI company called GravityAI. Can you guys explain specifically what GravityAI does?
Yeah. So I founded GravityAI almost 4 years ago. I was head of, prior to launching the company, I was head of product management, building a true artificial intelligence product at one of the largest financial institutions in the world called State Street. And I encountered a lot of challenges while I was at State Street in building my own AI product while I was there. Essentially, there are thousands of different types of AI models. For the purposes of this, we'll refer to them as models, bits of code and math, right, that perform some sort of AI function. And there's thousands of them available, but lots of organizations struggle to get access to like third-party stuff. So you ended up in situations, companies, and I certainly did, end up in situations where they reinvent the wheel. They have to build something internally that's already been solved. I'll give you an example. And we hardly even think of this as AI today, but it is within the field of data science. It's a model. The product that I was building at State Street ingested huge quantities of financial news and used natural language processing and a bunch of proprietary different AI models to intelligently connect that news to State Street customers' portfolio holdings like stocks, right, equities. So if Apple was in the news, it might get connected in an intelligent way back to Apple, your stock in your portfolio. We had a bunch of articles somehow get through our pipeline of AI, and this is true about Justin Bieber. And not like Justin Bieber starting a hedge fund or anything. It was very irrelevant, right? Yeah. It was, for our purposes, spam. And we decided that we needed to basically have like a first gate before content made it through our other processes, and we needed a spam filter. And it turns out that many companies had built a spam filter for financial news, and we found 3. We evaluated all of them, picked the one that we wanted. It looked like we were going to be able to get them up and running in just a matter of weeks in the platform. We were going to license it, that technology from that company for $1,000 per month. They were stoked. I was stoked. Here's what happened. That's a small company. State Street's a huge company. State Street has difficulty working with companies of that size because that company doesn't have the insurance that they require, the security like SOC 2 compliance that companies like State Street requires, all sorts of other procurement and compliance issues. So instead of being able to use that one AI spam filter model for $12,000 a year, right, $1,000 per month, and getting it up and running in 2 weeks, well, we had to rebuild it because we were never going to be able to access it. We rebuilt it in 3 months. I estimate that it probably cost us $250,000 in resources to reinvent this thing. And that was unsettling to me. So I lived through the problem that GravityAI is trying to solve, and I spent about the last 4 to 6 months of my tenure at State Street, like just noodling this problem, loving this problem of thousands of creators who are data scientists who've built AI, don't have a way to distribute that AI at scale to large companies, let alone individuals and small businesses. With that problem, I set out a bunch of different ways that I might be able to address it, right? I came up with probably 11 or 12 different concepts to try to tackle that. What I settled on after a lot of user research and concept testing was a true two-sided marketplace for these types of AI models. So data scientists who are like freelancers or PhD students, could be data science consultancies or companies that do AI, they take different types of AI that they've built. You can use examples like ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion, right? These are the types of AI models that we see on our platform. They add them to our platform to sell them. What our company does is take whatever code they wrote that AI in and make it extremely accessible to people in a no-code way. So that's what GravityAI does. And then once that code is available to individuals in a no-code way, we sell it on the marketplace on behalf of the creator.
So are they taking a cut of the revenue you make from it?
Exactly, just like any other marketplace.
So you guys could be working in tandem with ChatGPT?
We could be.
As the middleman?
We could be distributing ChatGPT on behalf of OpenAI.
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Unlikely that we would do ChatGPT.
Yeah.
They're a massive company, and that's a very proprietary bit of technology.
Yeah.
However, there are lots of companies building competing technologies to ChatGPT who aren't as big, don't have enough funding, who would look at us as a really good distribution mechanism. In fact, we do have types of AI models on the platform, maybe not quite as good as ChatGPT yet, although they will be, that different creators have uploaded to the platform that you can access today.
Oh, and
You go.
really quickly. I just want to get through this point. So the conversion from an AI to a no-code, what are the differences? So you take an AI, yeah, and you convert it to a no-code that's more accessible to users. What are the differences between that AI and no-code, and why can't the user go straight to the AI?
So when we think about what AI is, it's just math and code, right? Often Python is oftentimes what that code is being written in today, but there's other coding languages, Julia, MATLAB, Go, other ways of writing it. And I personally don't know a lot of Python. If I gave anyone in this room, I'm guessing, a Python script and said, a Python script that generated images and just gave you a file of code and said, run this, I'm guessing you guys wouldn't know how.
Well, it would take me 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
No, I'm joking. I don't know.
You Google how do I run Python
We do
scripts.
with ChatGPT.
You'd ask ChatGPT, how do I run Python? You'd need to download something like Visual Studio, which is code editor, all sorts of other things would need to go into it. So I myself actually would not very easily know how to run it, right? So what our platform does is automatically take that code, wraps it in a nice box, and to make code into no code, you basically need to have it have a user interface on it, right? So how do you take code and automatically create a user interface on it? Well, that's the crux of the technology that we've built to do that automatically and at scale. So if you have something that you type in a prompt and will generate an image, basically you take that code, and we've created a way to automatically make that have a UI with it and scale with the amount of users that might actually want to use it.
Where do you guys think ChatGPT and AI is headed? What's next?
Do you want to go first? Because
I was reading an interesting article about this today. I'm forgetting her name, but she was a venture capitalist, and she did this kind of summary of everything. And she was saying, like, there are so many companies out right now that are going from $0 to 10 million in months or a year, just being built off of generative AI, just that specific aspect. In that video that I linked in the final slide, this guy talks about exactly that. Like, there is just so much opportunity right now, especially for like really, really small niches for companies to be built in those spaces, because it's so easy to just go build a prototype and start building off of it. Like, you can go access OpenAI Labs and you can access a bunch of their different models and start training it for your specific use case, and you just pay like less, like a tenth of a cent for their most accurate or optimized model. So it's really hard to say exactly like where things are going to go, because I think there's going to be so many things and so many use cases that are being built. One thing I'm sure is going to happen is there's going to be a lot of consolidation, especially like you look at all these copywriting tools. There's probably like 30 of those on my database. That's not going to last forever. They've got to find some way to be better than the other 29 that are on there. And it's the same thing that's happened with like cars and is happening with EVs. So there is going to be some consolidation, but I think there's going to be a lot more players in the marketplace before that happens overall.
Yeah, it's definitely going to boom before that happens. But it's going to, basically what we're seeing right now is exactly what happened in the early days of the internet. When the internet first kind of came into being, you had a lot of like experimentation. And then you had the dot-com boom, right? Where everyone was trying out whatever they could on the internet. And a lot of the things that did fail in the dot-com boom, we have like completely today, right? Like grocery delivery was huge in the dot-com boom, and for some reason failed back then, but obviously is like huge today. But there was an immense amount of experimentation, a huge fragmentation of markets and disruption taking place of existing companies and markets. And that disruption led to many huge incumbent players, big corporations going out of business, and new companies taking their place. Think Amazon, right? Amazon's a relatively young company compared to Sears.
Yeah.
Sears does not exist anymore, right? But Sears was around for a very, very long time before Amazon basically, came up and destroyed it. So we're mirroring that right now. You're going to see an incredible amount of experimentation and testing of ideas, which is very, very exciting. And then, as Ben said, the bottom will drop out. You'll see consolidation. Many of those experiments will fail. Companies will fail. Many will get bought by larger organizations that view them as an opportunity to expand and compete. But one of the other things that we're seeing right now that's kind of enabling this, that also mirrors the early way that we think about the web. In the early web, you had to, and I mentioned this actually in the no-code presentation today, you had to send a ticket to someone that was called a webmaster to make any kind of change to a website. And that webmaster knew how to code, and the only people who knew how to code were the people who had complete control over the website. This was what we referred to as Web 1.0. Then we had the advent of content management systems, essentially platforms that took capabilities that previously were only in the hands of the people who knew how to code and created UI systems, user experience systems, that allowed individuals who didn't know how to code to create basic websites. This is the transition into Web 2.0. During that time period, into the Web 2.0 transition, billion-dollar businesses were created that were supporting low-code, no-code building of websites, like Wix, like Squarespace. WordPress gained prominence at that time, and then you had entire ecosystems to support the creators in that space. You had WordPress theme marketplaces and plugins. You had entire service industries to help build, Squarespace websites. Even though it was no code, you had people who had mastered the no code platform, right, to do it. So you had these huge ecosystems around it. Right now, we're seeing the exact same thing in data science. For years, we were in data science 1.0, where it was the concepts of data science were completely guarded and controlled by data scientists. They were the ones who understood how artificial intelligence worked and created and built those models, and it was very expensive to do so, so only the most valuable problems in AI got solved. Think algorithmic search for like Google. Think like ad targeting, which is actually AI, right? Like how we think about ads basically create a profile of you and use clustering and all other things to target you. These are extremely valuable problems to solve in terms of like making a company money. It was very expensive to do so, so you had to only solve those. That was data science 1.0. We're transitioning, just like the web did, into data science 2.0, where you still need data scientists to create these models, but platforms like mine, GravityAI, and many others are developing user experience systems to allow people to access these models in ways that they never had before. World famous data scientist Andrew Ng gave a TED Talk last year. He talks extensively about this. He talks about the idea how very quickly we'll be able to get an AI model in the hands of a pizza shop owner that can put in their sales data for a year and be able to predict whether or not a Hawaiian or a Sicilian will sell better on a Wednesday. That's the type of direction that we're moving into data science 2.0. Opening up data science through no-code facilities for very specific instances to users that otherwise would not have had access to it.
What are the dangers?
While you answer that, I'm gonna run to the bathroom.
Yeah, immense. This is an entire. I sit on the board for several AI ethics committees, and there are huge dangers to the proliferation of artificial intelligence. Now, let's take a quick step back and look at history, because it is worth putting all of this in context and in scale. Before we get into what are very real dangers of the proliferation of AI. But there was a huge backlash when the cotton gin was invented. That this new technology that separated cotton balls from the plant was going to destroy an entire industry, wreck people's livelihoods. In fact, a small revolution was started because of the cotton gin and new technology. Similarly, when the internet came around, like everyone's going to lose their jobs, like it's going to replace people. All of this is history just constantly repeating itself. We should take a look back at that and say, yes, our lives did change when the cotton gin was created and when the internet was created. Did it fundamentally bring down society like a lot of people were talking about? Absolutely not. Yeah. Did everybody and their mother lose their jobs? No. Did some people? Yes. Were new jobs created? Absolutely. Yeah. So let's take a breath and say, all right, the world isn't going to end. This has happened in history before, these types of game-changing technologies. And now let's have a sensible conversation about the real danger.
I can think of reasons why, and I'm obviously not the smartest or an expert on AI by any sense of the imagination, but I can say that I think that there are dangers with the implications of AI that didn't exist maybe with obviously a very feeble technology like the cotton gin or the web. Even the web, I feel like AI can have its own implications that are a little bit more dangerous than those.
I would agree with that statement for several reasons. One of the main ones is scale. The scale and interconnectedness of the world is obviously like nothing that ever existed prior to this. And because of the scale, the widespread impacts are going to be larger than any technology previous to this. Many of the dangers are obviously going to also be extremely unique to AI. Even ones that like we've seen kind of play out before, right? They're still going to have unique qualities to them in the context of artificial intelligence. Yeah. So your thinking on that is correct. Scale and unique things that we just haven't had to consider yet are going to definitely take place.
And is this the first time we're giving up responsibility to a degree? Because I asked you about the fact that there are 9 billion people on this earth, and if all of them have access to ChatGPT, for example, it would be very quick it would take a very short amount of time for ChatGPT to know everything. Because 9 billion people, how many iterations and how many combinations of things need to be set into ChatGPT before ChatGPT knows everything? And then you explained to me that there are restrictions with the knowledge that ChatGPT can acquire. But there's also competitors to ChatGPT. So what's stopping one of those competitors from making another AI system like ChatGPT and letting it be completely free and no restrictions? And then ChatGPT knows everything in a matter of maybe 2-3 years.
So there's a couple, if we were to unpack that, a couple dangers that are associated with that. So when we talk about in artificial intelligence knowing everything, it's important to not personify the AI. It doesn't actually have any real concept of that knowledge. The best analogy that I saw, literally, and I wish I could remember the author's name, but just to cite it, because it was the first time that I saw this used in this context. But literally just a week ago, an analogy, or Plato's allegory of the cave, which was a famous allegory, literally created by the famous philosopher Plato, was used to describe the way that ChatGPT approaches the world. In Plato's allegory of the cave, there's someone in a cave who can only see shadows on a wall, and for that person in the cave who can only experience those shadows are their entire world, and they only can describe the world through their experience with the shadows, never knowing that there were 3 dimensions, that there were things behind them casting those shadows, that there was so much more of a broad world out there. So ChatGPT is only seeing shadows of us as human beings, and it's only able to interpret those shadows. It's not sentient. It doesn't have a concept of self. If you ask it to describe itself, it will, but it's describing a shadow of how humans would describe themselves as if they were AI. It's incredibly good at pretend and mimicry.
There's a fear of AI becoming sentient. How does that process unfold?
Or does it even unfold ever?
There's a lot of research on this and a lot of speculation with various AI researchers placing timelines on which we reach a sentient AI. Some people believe that we never will. In fact, a very large number of AI researchers believe that we'll never reach a point where we have something sentient. And we should also probably separate like artificial general intelligence from sentience, which we could get into. There's a whole handful of researchers that believe that it will happen, but we probably won't see it in our lifetimes. I've seen estimates as 60 years from now, and I've seen estimates like that it could happen within the decade. Of my personal opinion, again, I am not a data scientist or an AI researcher, just someone deep within that industry and knowing what AI today is capable of. It's very unlikely that we will see sentience in the way that we believe that like we are sentient, right? That also like raises a whole bunch of philosophical questions like that we struggle with even for humans and animals today. Are insects sentient? I think we would say that they are. And what makes them sentient though versus a virus? Because viruses are on the border between alive and dead. They're basically just self-replicating proteins.
Like a host too.
They need a host, but we wouldn't necessarily even think of viruses as potentially living things. They're chemicals, and those chemicals are very good at self-replicating when they come into contact with something like a human body. There's debate whether we should even consider viruses alive or dead. Well, should we even consider them sentient? So how do we even define sentience when it comes to artificial intelligence is going to be something that's hotly debated for the next couple of decades.
Viruses are harmful, but they're not sentient. Can AI be harmful while not being sentient?
Yes. in small and big ways. One, we should recognize that artificial intelligence, we have a saying in the field that all models are wrong, some models are useful. So an over-reliance on AI that might not have which will never have a degree of perfection that people might think that it does, right? Like imagine self-driving cars. To what degree are self-driving cars acceptable when they crash? Like, do they have to never crash, right, for it to be acceptable to have self-driving cars? Well, humans crash all the time. Do they just have to be better than humans? I think we would probably put a higher degree of restriction on self-driving. They have to be much better than humans before they become acceptable. But then you get into like questions like, well, how does the self-driving car make decisions on the road? Now we're in classic philosophical trolley problem, right? Yeah. Does it swerve? This was featured in the movie I, Robot. This is classic trolley problem. The AI has to make a decision whether to hit 10 people or one person, right? It's on the path to hit 10 people. Should it change direction and hit just the one person? Well, it was already on the path to hit the 10 people. Now the AI makes a decision within its programming somehow to go just hit one person. Now, there's no right or wrong here, right? This is why this is so difficult. But that's some of the potential like philosophical things that we're going to have to get a handle on with AI. One of the reasons, though, that I bring up the over-reliance or assumptions that AI is always right, like you start getting with like things like ChatGPT. ChatGPT, famously right now integrated with Bing, believes it's 2022. Imagine that it's giving less obvious false information that people are believing. So it could be a very damaging from a disinformation standpoint. AIs could be used similarly to make decisions when those are poor, right? We oftentimes talk about like humans analyzing the results of an AI. We refer to it as a human-in-the-loop process. We need to make sure that the humans are trained enough to understand how the AI makes its decisions, that it's not always right, and what to do with the information they get from the AI. That's only one tiny category of danger that is present right now, because we haven't even gotten into the way that's like AIs just being wrong and having to make decisions. We haven't even gotten to the way that humans could abuse AI, which we are much bigger threats.
Yeah.
This is a human threat.
It's a weapon.
Yes. Humans are the biggest threat with the misuse of AI than AI itself.
Yeah, I think we should shift this conversation to a more positive note.
But this one's so interesting.
Yeah, this is the most interesting.
What do you guys think AI, like what new opportunities and even jobs do you think AI brings to the table?
I was just talking with my mentee about this last night. We were talking about tools like Dolly, where you can create images in seconds, any type of image you want, or all of these copywriting tools. There's a lot of talk about how this technology is going to take away jobs, and it probably will, but it's also going to optimize jobs and give people who were spending hours creating designs a lot more time, because they'll be able to generate ideas and then build off of those ideas. I think like you're gonna need to know how to use these tools if you are a creative person, or like if you're a coder. Like a coder who knows how to use Copilot versus doesn't probably is probably going to be a bit more effective or just quicker with the way they work, and that just adds up over time. But I think there'll still be like those people who go and do things the manual way, like the people who are still instead of creating graphics on like Adobe Illustrator, they're still painting and doing all that stuff. And those people that are really good at that like make a lot of money and they're really successful. I think there'll still be people doing things the old way, but I think the average person is going to need to know how to use these AI and no-load code tools to make themselves appealing as a job candidate, or just to do their own work better.
So they're not like necessarily a replacement to your job, but just a tool to like enhance and make your life more productive.
Yeah, because I don't think like Well, first of all, like copywriters, I don't think many of them are just going to ChatGPT saying, "Hey, give me copy for this," taking that copy and putting it on the website, because it's not perfect, and you're going to want to make your own edits. You can tell that it's plagiarized, basically, that it's created by AI. So it's just giving you like a basis or like a foundation to test things out and then build from and refine in your own way.
Have you guys heard of Naval?
No.
Naval's this very profound guy. He's been on some podcasts. And he was basically saying that...
Naval Ravikant?
Yeah, I think that might be his last name. Civilization started like hunter-gatherer, where you're basically fending for yourself or a small tribe, and then it becomes agricultural, right? So then it's starting to become you're fending for a larger group of people, and then it becomes industrial, where it's thousands of people working in a warehouse for a joint cause, and then now we're like in the crossroads between an industrial and technological revolution. So, of course, jobs are going to be taken away with new technology, but new jobs are going to be created. So there's no more stagnant, extremely, I don't want to say easy, but what's the right word for this? Mechanical jobs, right? Those will start to fade out, and people will have to start acquiring more and more creative jobs because these things are more and more accessible. I mean, we just created a website today during your guys' 15 minutes. 1 hour, 15-minute presentation in which you were talking for 45 minutes of. So
I think you know, the in the first industrial revolution, it was really that like replacement of unskilled labor, right? And then obviously like when the internet came around, like we started to see unskilled labor, like more and more robotics came in and automated stuff, and those jobs kind of got replaced. And to your point about like people getting more creative, I think that the worry today is that these elements are actually going to replace the creatives. And there is going to be an element of that. I suspect, though, that the folks who are utilizing something like DALL-E or ChatGPT and actually putting it onto like their materials, whatever they're using it for, they're the people that probably wouldn't have been paying those creatives to begin with. So the job and economic loss to that division, I'm going to guess, is fairly minimal. Like, it might not be necessarily replacing creatives. What's most likely happening is that it's opening up creative for people who wouldn't have been paying them to do that job anyway. And to your point, Ben, the creatives that do exist likely will be able to charge a premium because those skills and having it done with human hands will command a higher price. So I suspect that creatives some will lose their jobs, but many, it probably won't have the impact that we think it will have as of right now. And then these tools will actually be used by creatives, like you mentioned, just like when Photoshop came out, by creatives to augment what they do so they can do it faster and better. In terms of like other job creation, it's going to be immense and it's very difficult to predict. But we are going to see entire ecosystems around every one of these types of AI. So you're going to have, just like you had marketing agencies that sprang up for digital marketing when websites became a thing. Well, then you had subdivisions like analytics companies that only did analytics. Well, then you had analytics companies who built analytics software for digital marketing companies, right? A whole ecosystem. You're going to have experts in how these AIs work, and you're going to have services companies for those, and you're going to have tons and tons of spin-off companies that leverage these platforms or augment these platforms or plugins for these platforms, which are going to create an enormous amount of jobs. It's definitely going to replace some. And honestly, the creative side of this, like with ChatGPT, those are probably not the jobs that are going to get replaced. It's going to replace, again, probably more unskilled labor, but it's going to create a whole bunch of other things that are very even impossible to predict yet.
Because I just noticed we've been running for over an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. To wrap this up, what advice would you give?
Really quick. If you guys want to keep going, it's up to you.
We'll start to wrap up. Maybe a couple more questions.
So that's one more question.
The beginning of the end.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the end, but this is like
beginning,
this is the ending of the beginning of the end. This is my last question.
Here's the thing before you jump into that. I could talk about all of this stuff for hours.
Yeah.
I haven't even given examples of where feasibility and viability failed. Like, I could go back to that. No, I'm just kidding. But, like, this is such an interesting and meaty topic. Like, there's so many different angles that we can go.
To this podcast.
We could, when Dan came over and did his class, we talked for like at least an hour and a half after the 3-hour lecture just about like quantum computing and physics and like what it means if we can crack quantum computing. What is quantum physics?
Yeah.
Showed us some crazy videos.
Do you
There's
guys-
like so much.
Do you guys
cool
have
stuff.
conversations like this all the time?
Pretty frequently.
I'll just go over and like we'll cook some steaks and then like we were
That's
talking
life.
about how the Bayesian theory.
Yeah,
right?
Bayesian theory.
And like about PTSD and how the brain works and calculates all these things with the statistics and that was crazy. That was like the conversation I think where I was like, okay, I need to learn more about AI.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, let's do a workshop because I want all my friends to have the same realization.
We also have a lot of like AI ethics conversations, like deep ones. Like, we barely touched on like AI ethics in the stuff that we covered here. Like, there's so much to cover there. It's an entire discipline now. But let's jump into your next question.
Last question. I would love, by the way, to buy a ticket to admission to one of these conversations. But
the price of admission is a 6-pack of beer.
okay, yeah.
You guys should be entrepreneurs, yeah. You guys have good ideas.
But this is why I think this is a fairly obvious question, but I think it's relevant to students. So a lot of these, we said that a bunch of new jobs will be created. In turn, a bunch of new industries will be created because of this technological burst, right? So what's stopping a student like me and Mo from thinking, wow, our majors right now are going to be completely useless once ChatGPT can do all of it, right?
Don't say that.
No. What's the value, right, of and this is, I hope this is not motivation for people to drop out of school, but this is just a question. What's the value of a major that in 10 years will be useless?
So let's unpack this. One, because that supposes that these technologies are going to get to a point that we're speculating that they're going to get to a point that they can mimic stuff that you've learned, and they're not going to be able to. But I do understand the heart of that question is that a lot of these things that are coming out today are going to supplement or replace bits of knowledge that you're picking up within your education. I'm an educator. I taught college in New York. I still teach courses. I teach like enterprise trainings, and I think that it behooves all of us to have a core value associated with like entrepreneurship, of lifelong learning, and a growth mindset. Your education today, just like how you ask a 5-year-old what they want to be when they grow up, right? And they answer ice cream man. You were asked what your major is going to be. Well, why are you even learning to begin with? And your major is only a very, very small part of your college education. We talked about critical thinking earlier. Yeah. Your ability to take the information that you've learned that perhaps is specific to your major, but apply that to other industries and apply that to new technologies like AI that are coming out, that's the real benefit of education, is being able to connect dots and think critically about things. If you're a finance major, you can see problems in the finance industry that AI can solve, for example. You might connect something that's happening in finance to supply chain and logistics after you go get a job out of college. And then, you know what, you had a natural disasters course here at SDSU, like I did, and you learn about like certain emissions that are happening, you know, from agriculture, and you realize that an AI model could optimize the pricing strategy around AI. I don't know, I'm making shit up, right? But like, it's literally connecting the dots between life experiences. And the only way to do that is to get constantly educated on new things. Just because you've built up a base of information that we're labeling our major right now doesn't mean you should stop learning, but that base of information is incredibly important. That's where that's your foundation that you're going to continue to layer things on and use to think critically.
And this is another iteration to this question. You said that in the very beginning of this podcast, focus is overrated. So what's to stop someone from being like, listening to conversations like this about a variety of subjects, right? Hopping from interest to interest is more valuable than concentrating on a very particular subject or particular major.
We've talked about this a lot because like I've had issues, I guess more like internal issues with like, oh, like I am a generalist. Like I don't want to be a person who gets just really good at one thing and that's it. Like I know if I just did one thing, I'd be bored as hell. And I like so many different things and I like have good foundations to be good at so many things. I think that being a generalist is a bit tougher because you have to be a good level of skill and education in like all of these different aspects. And it's a bit harder like when you go to a company, like companies generally are looking for like one specific thing. And it's cool if you do other stuff, but like if you can't do this one specific thing really well, they might not hire you. Depends a lot on the company. But going back to your question, like I think for students, one, having that diverse education is going to allow you to connect the dots like Dan was saying. And I think also the real value of school is not the classes that you're taking and like the theory that you're learning. It's like, are you applying that theory or are you going and getting certifications in other important skills and building a portfolio? Like that is one of the number one things that I think people should be doing is like taking that theory, that's cool, go build something with it and then learn from that, expand on that same kind of skill that you built with or go build another thing. Like take the theory and then apply it across a diverse range of stuff and then I think that's kind of the best route.
On the point of being a generalist, I am an expert generalist. I have gone vertically deep in being a generalist, and I'm able to do so because what a generalist needs to be able to do is absorb and learn things quickly. You know what teaches you how to learn stuff quickly? Being in school, right? School teaches you how to absorb information and retain it. So there's something in like learning theory called metacognition, thinking about what you are thinking about. School teaches you how to retain and think about information. You don't necessarily, and like a major, I firmly again believe focus is overrated. And you, in the context of like education, if you need to change your major many times before you find a fit for you. You need to go like be that map maker and sail the seas and bushwhack in psychology, and then like that's not for me. Hop back in your ship, bush back over to marketing. I am one that would highly encourage that, assuming you have the means and the time to do so, recognizing that that's not always possible. However, it's not mutually exclusive. Again, that's just a base of information. You can go explore to your heart's content outside of the educational systems or within the educational systems, for that matter, right? And get information. Like your major doesn't even really, honestly, make you an expert at anything, right? Like it's going to take years before you've got deep knowledge on that subject anyway. It again just sets a foundation that allows you to then go explore. And I think people should explore a ton, but realize why you're even getting that education, which is to learn how to learn and learn how to think.
And I think also like being a generalist and having a diverse range of experience and skills lends well to being an entrepreneur, because you are going to start a company and you are going to have a bunch of people on your team that are engineers or sales and marketing people or finance people, like all of these different aspects, and you need to be able to hire the best people in those positions and give them the guidance and strategy that they need to do their best jobs. So you need to be able to understand those positions, or at least quickly adapt and learn to that position so you can give them what they need to succeed. And there are definitely like entrepreneurs who are just like, I'm just a technical guy, like I'm just gonna be the coder, but they're gonna have to bring in somebody who's gonna be the CEO and is able to guide everybody else. So I think that's one of the superpowers of being an entrepreneur, one of like the key traits.
Generalist. And that answer satisfies me. Learn how to learn. That's satisfying enough. It's like, okay, I'll stay in college for the next year and a half. I'm fine. That's what I tell myself before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
But honestly,
That's what
I
keeps
could,
us sane.
yeah, I could ask a million more questions, and this could be 70 hours.
This could go
But
on forever.
I want to kind of close it off on a note that some people can maybe take home a nugget of wisdom. If you're 20 years old, what do you do differently? Because a lot of these listeners are going to be 20 years old, our friends.
If you guys could go back and do it again, what would you do different? Or what would a 20-year-old in their
Version of you,
circumstances
yeah.
do now?
I would have, like, if I was going to go back and change anything that I did, I would have just stuck with my company and continued doing that instead of going to help start another one. But I think, like, in general, for like 20-year-olds, the number one thing that I'd say is start building things. Like, go get a certificate. And like, I've talked to my sister, and she wants to, she thinks she wants to be like a journalist for like social justice types of things. So I'm like, okay, like go find people who are doing that right now, ask them like what skills, like how did they learn what they're doing, and what is the type of work that they do. Learn those skills, build something with those skills. You'll get to see whether you like it or not. And if you don't, go try something new. Like even if you do, cool, like add another thing onto your portfolio. So try stuff out, be diverse, and build up a portfolio.
This experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, do you have anything to?
So I'm 38, turning 39 in a couple months here, and so I have the benefit of being close to midlife and getting to look back as, you know, I've had as much adulthood as a 20-year-old has had of an entire life. One, Ben, I very much agree with that sentiment. Like from like a professional standpoint, make shit, just make shit. But
stuff.
from more of a like life perspective, it took me, and I even did this I think a lot earlier than most people. You really need to make your value system explicit. Write it down. Write your core values that are your North Star down, because you're going to be faced with situations, again, going back to uncertainty, and decisions that are very difficult to make. And you have, again, very little knowledge to make those. By society standards, at 20 years old, you've been an adult for 2 years. You're a 2-year-old, right? So you don't have a whole...
That's a very interesting way to
Yeah.
So you're being, and again, like you're a 2-year-old being asked to make huge life decisions, right? Without good knowledge of the future, right? If you understand your core value system, it helps you make decisions that feel like they're long, like that they're big and distant and uncertain. Because you can say, is this getting me closer in line with my values, or is this removing me from my values? And it provides like that kind of, again, North Star for you to this distant North Star for you to always kind of navigate towards as you're faced with incredibly difficult decisions in a very, very uncertain world.
And that comment opens up questions about, are you guys religious? What are your daily habits? We can't ask all that.
Well, I mean, I think that's what people who are working towards their values should set, right? Like, what do they want to see out of the world, right? How do they want their values to translate to their behavior? And it's their life experiences that are going to shape those core values, right? And let's really quickly, values are fairly stable. Like they typically don't change, while beliefs change. Beliefs are a manifestation of your core values, right? Like we probably all value in this room human life, so we won't take that life. One of your beliefs might be, if I take a life, I'll go to hell. Or maybe one of your beliefs is that if I take a life, nothing will happen, but it's still in line with my core value, right, from a religious standpoint. So your beliefs might shift throughout your life, as they should when faced with new information. When you receive new information that is opposed to an existing belief, you should change that belief. Core values, however, are a little bit more stable, and that's why they provide you that North Star. But they come from your life experiences. That's religion, your upbringing, your culture, your education, all the things that surround and make you who you are.
So your beliefs shift within the parameters of your values.
Yes.
Or they're always in accordance with your value, or with your values.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully.
But I mean, I second what you're saying. I think some of the best advice I got from one of my company advisors was I was dealing with a lot of like tough decisions about what to do with my co-founders, whether to shut the company down, and this was even before I was facing that at the end. But she said, write down your core values, and that's going to be your system for how you make decisions. And it made it so much easier because I could just be like, okay, like, is this aligned with being truthful and transparent? Yes, no. If it's yes, cool, go do it. If not, I need to rethink like what I'm doing. The second thing that I started thinking about when you were talking about that was, I think for 20-year-olds, really starting to tackle your weaknesses and insecurities and be like a very introspective person and spend time thinking about your core values, but thinking about like who you are, like what are your strengths, not just professionally but personally, like what are your triggers, what trauma's going on in your life, how does that show up, like being very aggressive on your own mental health.
Aggressively mindful.
Aggressively mindful. Yeah. I think that's something that's super important. I think in the past like 5 years, there's been a lot more people talking about that type of stuff. But I also think like there's this type of toxic entrepreneur that's the person that's working 60, 70 hours a week. They're only focused on their business, and they're neglecting everything else. And they're not spending time on themselves or other people in their family. And most of those people are going to, maybe they're successful with the business, probably not for long, because you can't do that for long. But I think they'll end up being successful with that company, and then they'll be like, wow, like I've lost 5-10 years of my life and I've done nothing. Like I don't have very many friends I'm close with, things like that. And fortunately, a lot of people talk nowadays, like they don't believe in doing the 60-70 hours a week every single week. Like yeah, there's going to be some times where you need to buckle down and get through some shit, but I think focusing on like introspection and like realizing how you are viewed externally and like how you view yourself and starting to work on those things at an early age will really set you apart from a lot of other 20-year-olds.
If you're bragging about constantly working 60-70 hours per week, like that's like a badge of honor to you, and you're bragging to people about that, one, I probably hate you. But two, I would ask you, what belief is driving you to believe that that's core and worth bragging about? And then how does that align to one of your values, right? Like what value and belief is driving you to think that working 60 to 70 hours per week is worth bragging about? It's a badge of honor. And I would encourage that person to look at like very deeply, is this a real value? And is this the right behavior for that value?
Well, values are subjective. So that's the thing, everyone believes their values are the...
You gotta write them down so you know them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of internal work, introspection.
Yeah. It also makes it easier if things go wrong. That's happened to me plenty of times in business and personal life. But if I can look back and be like, well, you know what? Like, I followed my values, and things didn't pan out the way I wanted, but like, I am happy with the way that I acted because I acted in line with my values. Like, yeah, things suck, but I'm proud of the way that I behaved.
Just to close this off, what are 3 things that everyone should do every day? Like 3 habits that you guys think are super valuable.
So I'm going to give an answer to this that's slightly unsatisfying to the actual question itself. I'm not a particularly organized person or focused individual. I do believe that routine is probably pretty important. I am not very good at routines. I wake up every day and am attempting to just get some of what I need to do done, my guy. Like I don't have tips around things that people could do to like get more productive in the morning. There's a local San Diego entrepreneur who I have a lot of respect for. He says you should do something every day for your health, wealth, and happiness. Dude, I can barely get most of some of the shit done that I need to do during the day. I'm going to just try my best to recognize that I don't have to like set these crazy objectives for myself. So it's a good question, and I do think like people should analyze like how I want my day to unfold, right? I cannot be one of those persons. I wake up and my day is going to unfold. It's going to unfold before me.
We'll see what happens.
And if I can hit on a couple core things that are in line with my values, then I've had a good day.
It's a good way to navigate.
Well, still, there's some habits that you do that you think are important. Maybe not pertaining to AI, but like reading, boxing, whatever it is.
Man, but I can't do that. I don't do that every day.
Yeah.
I just can't. I can't commit. I literally can't commit to like even attempting to do things in a day. You know.
What about sleep?
Sleep's a big one.
Sleep's something I feel like everyone should do.
Yeah.
I have a core belief that I'm not going to sacrifice my sleep for like overwork, right? But even
there's
then,
so many other things you can sacrifice before sleep.
yeah, totally.
Like people say, oh,
Yeah.
sleep less. You know.
Yeah, that's
But
the
like,
worst thing that you can do.
Yeah,
Like,
you should be less productive.
I align a lot with what you're saying because I've got all of these like scientific tools and like productivity tools for making sure like I have the best day. But the reality is, oftentimes I forget about them, or I'm like literally like today and yesterday I was just like, you know what, I'm not gonna meditate today. I'm not gonna go work out. I need to get shit done, and I just got it done.
Yeah.
Normally, like I like to wake up and I like to get sunlight in my eyes within the first hour. I don't have caffeine for like 90 minutes or 2 hours, and I try to get exercise in the first 2 hours. Like that's a great morning to me, and that is like if I do that in the morning, I am very productive the rest of the day. But there's times where like I'm just lazy and I just want to lay in bed and I don't want to go out, or it's windy and cold, or like I just got a lot of stuff to do. I got a presentation I got to put together and a bunch of things to update, so I don't get it done. But I think there's like generally like sleep is probably one of the most important thing. Like you need to be getting quality sleep and enough sleep, and that is the foundation of everything. That's when you are resetting everything, all of your neurochemicals, everything in your brain. That's when you're transcribing everything that happened in the day into your basically like your storage, and that's when your brain is learning from everything. That's when your body is replenishing everything that's going on in it, and if you're not getting enough sleep, you're just gonna wake up and you're gonna be deleted. Yeah, enough and quality.
And quality is determined by what you do before you sleep and after you wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like drinking or smoking weed or like nicotine or even like melatonin will disrupt your sleep, but you should not be taking that. I think like the other foundation after sleep is physical health. Actually, I think even more important than physical health is mental health. And I think working on that will allow you to work on to be successful in everything else. So I think if you have sleep and your mental health down, you can be you're in a good spot to be successful with everything. Add on physical health, just like doing 30 minutes of exercise a day, and you're in a really, really good spot.
So to summarize, for you, and maybe for everybody, like more broadly, take care of your chemicals in your brain through replenishing through sleep. Take care of your mental state. Take care of your physical state. But realize, like myself, that chances are you're not going to be able to do all of that every day, and don't beat yourself up if you're not able to.
Perfect.
Good summary.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming on.
so
Yeah,
much.
thank you
My
guys.
pleasure.
That was fun.
It's a fun way to kick off
Yeah.
the ES.
Yeah, first one.
And now that the podcast is over, I'm inviting you guys to do part 2. Whenever you guys
want.
100%.
Whatever you guys
Dive
want.
deep into AI.
Yeah, man.
No, I feel like that one. I feel like we can do, especially with you guys, part 3, part 4, part 5.
I'll always be on it.
Yeah.
All right,
It's officially off.
Hit it.
3, 2, 1.